Radiation is one of the most terrifying threats humanity has ever unleashed upon itself. Not because it's explosive, but because it's invisible, silent, and capable of lingering for centuries in the soil, the air, the water, and even within the human body. Radioactive contamination happens when unstable atomic particles, such as cesium-137, iodine-131, or plutonium-239, are released during nuclear meltdowns, accidents, or weapons tests, spreading deadly energy that continues to decay slowly, long after people have fled. Unlike a typical disaster that leaves debris or fire in its wake, radiation leaves behind a poisoned environment that appears deceptively normal, making it all the more dangerous for those who enter unaware. In today's journey, we'll count down 5 of the most radioactive places on Earth, locations so deadly and contaminated that stepping foot inside them without protection could mean irreversible damage or even death. These are not relics of a distant past. They are real, ongoing reminders of how far-reaching and catastrophic human error and ambition can be when combined with nuclear technology. Tucked away on the stormy coast of Cumbria, England, lies Sellafield, a vast and aging nuclear complex that was once at the heart of Britain's atomic ambitions and today is home to some of the most dangerous radioactive material in Europe. Originally known as Windscale, the facility suffered a major disaster in 1957 when a reactor caught fire, releasing radioactive iodine into the atmosphere and contaminating the surrounding countryside and even parts of mainland Europe. Though the full extent of the disaster was hidden from the public for decades, it remains one of the worst nuclear events in Western history, and its consequences still echo through the plant's contaminated buildings and storage sites. Sellafield today stores over 140 tons of plutonium, enough to build thousands of nuclear weapons. And its decaying infrastructure includes leaking waste tanks and radioactive sludge ponds that pose a continual threat to both workers and the environment. Despite massive investments in cleanup and decommissioning, experts estimate that it will take more than 100 years and tens of billions of dollars to render the site safe. And even then, large parts of the facility will remain strictly off-limits to the public. This once top-secret Cold War installation is now a symbol of radioactive legacy. Sealed away behind barbed wire and steel doors, where contamination still seeps silently into the earth and sea. Deep within the remote Ural Mountains of Russia lies a place so dangerous and shrouded in secrecy that most people outside the former Soviet Union have never even heard of it. The Mayak nuclear facility near the town of Kyshtym. Built in the late 1940s as part of Stalin's drive for nuclear supremacy, Mayak was one of the most secretive and heavily guarded sites in the Soviet nuclear program, churning out plutonium with little regard for safety or environmental impact. In 1957, a catastrophic accident occurred when a poorly maintained storage tank filled with radioactive waste exploded, sending a radioactive cloud across nearly 20,000 square kilometers of countryside, an area now known ominously as the East Ural Radioactive Trace. Entire villages were quietly evacuated, stripped from maps, and buried under contaminated soil, while thousands of civilians unknowingly lived and worked within the poisoned zone for years without any warning or medical aid. To this day, the area remains one of the most heavily contaminated places on the planet. And while Mayak is still in operation under strict government control, the surrounding land is littered with invisible danger, hotspots that can deliver a lethal dose of radiation in hours. Though the disaster was kept hidden from the world for decades, its impact has been compared to Chernobyl in scale, and its legacy remains locked away behind fences and forbidden forests where the trees still whisper radioactive secrets. Floating like a string of pearls in the turquoise waters of the Pacific Ocean, Bikini Atoll may look like a tropical paradise, but its beauty hides an apocalyptic past that still renders it unsafe for human life. Between 1946 and 1958, the United States conducted 23 nuclear detonations on and around Bikini Atoll, using it as a testing ground for hydrogen bombs that were hundreds of times more powerful than those dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The most infamous test, Castle Bravo, unleashed an unexpectedly massive explosion that created a fireball nearly 4 miles wide and spread radioactive fallout over thousands of square kilometers, including inhabited islands not warned of the danger. Residents of Bikini were relocated with promises they could return within a few years, But repeated contamination, botched cleanups, and radioactive isotopes embedded deep in the coral and soil have kept them away for more than 70 years. Scientists have measured dangerously high levels of cesium-137 in local crops and groundwater, and although some tourists and divers have visited under strict supervision, long-term habitation remains impossible. The ghostly ruins of bunkers, observation towers, and crumbling test vessels now lie half-buried in the sand and sea. Silent monuments to the Cold War's radioactive legacy, a paradise that was sacrificed in the name of power and fear. In March 2011, one of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded struck the coast of Japan, triggering a devastating tsunami that surged inland and crippled the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, unleashing the worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl. As walls of water overwhelmed the facility, backup generators failed, cooling systems shut down, and 3 reactor cores melted through their containment vessels, releasing radioactive material into the air, sea, and soil. Entire towns were evacuated in the span of hours, and a 20-kilometer exclusion zone was established around the site, displacing over 150,000 people and transforming once thriving communities into eerie ghost towns swallowed by nature. Inside the zone, buildings have decayed, streets are overtaken by vegetation, and wild animals roam freely where children once played, and families lived out their peaceful routines. Efforts to decontaminate the zone have been extensive, but radioactive particles, particularly cesium, remain embedded in the forests, hills, and even seasonal rainwater, making full recovery nearly impossible in the near future. The plant itself is still being dismantled, a slow and dangerous process expected to last until at least 2050, with areas so radioactive that only specially designed robots can operate inside. Though parts of the exclusion zone have been reopened with intense monitoring, vast regions remain too dangerous for return, leaving behind a fractured legacy of high technology undone by nature's fury and human oversight. At the top of our list lies the most infamous radioactive site on Earth, the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone, a haunting expanse of land surrounding the site of the 1986 nuclear disaster that changed the world forever. On April 26, 1986, Reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded during a late-night safety test, releasing a massive amount of radioactive material into the sky that would spread across Europe in the days that followed. The nearby city of Pripyat, built to house the plant's workers and their families, was evacuated in a matter of hours, leaving behind a surreal frozen world of abandoned schools, apartments, amusement parks, and personal belongings that still sit untouched. The area surrounding the reactor, known as the Red Forest, absorbed the brunt of the radiation, instantly killing trees and animals and remaining one of the most radioactive places on the planet to this day. Over 30 years later, the danger hasn't disappeared. In fact, radioactive isotopes like strontium-90 and cesium-137 will remain hazardous for centuries, making many parts of the zone completely unfit for human life. A giant steel sarcophagus now encases the destroyed reactor, a high-tech tomb designed to prevent further leakage. But it's only a temporary measure in a much longer battle to contain what cannot be erased. Though tourists can visit parts of the zone under strict control, large areas remain completely off-limits. And during the 2022 war in Ukraine, fears of renewed contamination resurfaced when troops disturbed radioactive dust in the region. Chernobyl is not just a site of tragedy, it is a symbol of our limits, a place where human hubris collided with atomic power, leaving behind a silent toxic monument to a disaster that still pulses beneath the surface. From isolated islands in the Pacific to snow-covered Russian forests, and from British coastlines to modern Japanese cities, radioactive contamination has scarred the Earth in ways we're still struggling to understand and contain. These forbidden zones are more than cautionary tales. They are living relics of our most dangerous experiments, where science and ambition outpaced caution, and the cost was measured in centuries of fallout. Let us never forget that what we unleash may not always be controlled, and that some places once touched by radiation may never be safe again. If you found this video eye-opening, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more chilling journeys into forbidden places, lost civilizations, and the haunting mysteries of our world. Which radioactive site shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments, and stay curious but stay safe.